Imagine discovering a hidden nation so dangerous that an entire wall had to be built just to keep them from reaching the outside world. A wall so enormous that it stood between two mountains. And behind it, a people whose arrival is mentioned as one of the great signs of the end times. This is the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog. But before we reach the terrifying part, we have to go back to the time of a mysterious and powerful ruler known as Dhul-Qarnayn. The Qur'an tells us that Allah gave him power in the land and provided him with the means to travel across distant regions. During one of his journeys, Dhul-Qarnayn reached a place between two great mountains. There, he encountered a people who could barely understand what was being said to them. They came to him with a desperate request. They told him that Ya'juj and Ma'juj were causing corruption throughout the land. They asked Dhul-Qarnayn to build a barrier between them and these people. And they were willing to pay him for it. But Dhul-Qarnayn refused their payment. Instead, he told them that what Allah had given him was better. Then he ordered them to bring enormous pieces of iron. The iron was placed between the two mountain sides, layer after layer, until the gap was filled. Then something incredible happened. He commanded them to heat the iron until it became like fire. And after that, molten copper was poured over it. The result was not an ordinary wall. It became a powerful barrier that Ya'juj and Ma'juj could neither climb over nor pierce through. But here's where the mystery becomes even more disturbing. The Qur'an tells us that this barrier will not remain forever. And one day, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released. For centuries, the barrier remained hidden from the world. No ordinary traveler knew exactly where it stood. No army could break through it. And behind this enormous barrier were Ya'juj and Ma'juj, a people whose corruption had once terrified those living beyond the mountains. But the Qur'an gives us something even more powerful. Dhul-Qarnayn said that the barrier was a mercy from his Lord. Yet he also warned that when Allah's promise came, the barrier would be reduced to dust. So the wall was never meant to last forever. It was only delaying something that Allah had already decreed. And this is where the story becomes connected to the signs of the last day. The Prophet Muhammad told us that Ya'juj and Ma'juj would eventually be released. Imagine that moment. A barrier that had protected people for generations begins to fail. The people trapped behind it finally pour through the mountains, spreading rapidly across the earth. The Qur'an describes them as rushing down from every elevated place. Their numbers would be so enormous that humanity would be completely overwhelmed. But there is an important detail we must understand. The Qur'an does not tell us the exact modern location of Dhul-Qarnayn's barrier. Throughout history, people have proposed different locations, from mountains in Central Asia to regions around the Caucasus. But none of these theories can be stated with certainty as the actual wall. And that means we should be careful. Instead of claiming that we have discovered the wall, we should focus on what Allah has actually revealed. Because the real mystery is not simply where the barrier is. The real mystery is what will happen when Allah's promise arrives. And according to the Qur'an and Sunnah, that moment will change the world forever. But the most terrifying part of the story has not even happened yet. Because when Ya'juj and Ma'juj finally emerge, even the believers will need Allah's protection. And what happens next is one of the most extraordinary events described in the signs of the last day. And then comes the moment that makes this story truly terrifying. According to the authentic narrations, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will emerge at a time when Prophet Isa is already present on earth. The believers will be with him, seeking refuge in the mountains. Why? Because the sheer number of Ya'juj and Ma'juj will make direct confrontation impossible. They will spread across the land with enormous numbers, consuming what they can and overwhelming everything in their path. The situation will become so severe that the believers will have no choice but to retreat and turn completely toward Allah. And this is one of the most powerful lessons in the entire story. Human strength will reach its limit. Weapons, armies, and wealth will mean nothing. The believers will have only one thing left: dua. They will call upon Allah for help. And then something extraordinary happens. Allah will answer that prayer. A calamity will strike Ya'juj and Ma'juj, causing them to perish. The people who seemed impossible for humanity to defeat will suddenly be destroyed, not by an army, not by a king, and not by human technology, but by the command of Allah. Afterward, the earth will be filled with their remains, creating another terrible problem for the believers. Prophet Isa, AS, and those with him will again turn to Allah. And Allah will send creatures that will carry away their bodies. Then rain will cleanse the earth. The land that had been overwhelmed by destruction will eventually become peaceful again. But there is a deeper message here. The story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj isn't simply about a mysterious wall hidden somewhere in the mountains. It is a reminder that Allah's promises cannot be stopped. A barrier can hold for centuries. A civilization can become powerful. Human beings can believe they control their future. But when Allah's decree arrives, nothing can prevent it. And perhaps the most frightening question isn't, where is the wall? It's this: are we prepared for the day when it finally opens? But there is one question that has fascinated people for centuries. Where is the barrier of Dhul-Qarnayn today? This question has led explorers, historians, and curious minds toward some of the most remote mountains on Earth. Some have pointed toward ancient walls in the Caucasus. Others have suggested locations in Central Asia. And some have even claimed that they discovered the legendary barrier. But there is a problem. None of these locations can be proven with certainty to be the barrier described in the Qur'an. And this is where we need to separate Islamic revelation from speculation. Allah gave us the story. Allah told us about Dhul-Qarnayn. Allah told us about the people who were protected from Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And Allah told us that when His promise comes, that barrier will no longer protect humanity from them. But Allah did not give us a modern map with an exact location. Perhaps that is why the mystery has survived for so long. Every generation wants to discover something hidden. Every explorer wants to be the person who finally solves the mystery. But sometimes, the most important part of a story isn't the secret we are trying to uncover. It's the warning hidden inside it. The story reminds us that human beings are limited. We can build enormous walls. We can create powerful kingdoms. We can explore distant lands. But none of these things can protect us from Allah's decree. And when the time comes for Ya'juj and Ma'juj to emerge, the world will realize just how powerless humanity truly is. So perhaps we should stop asking only, where is the wall? And start asking a much more important question. If Allah's promise came today, would we be ready? Because the wall may remain hidden from us, but the warning is already in front of us. And that is what makes the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj one of the most chilling mysteries mentioned in Islamic revelation. And perhaps the most important part of this story is not the wall itself. It is what the story tells us about Allah's power and the limits of human beings. Dhul-Qarnayn had incredible strength and resources. He traveled across distant lands, commanded people, and built a barrier that seemed almost impossible to destroy. Yet even that enormous structure had a limit. Allah says that when His promise comes, the barrier will be made level with the ground. Nothing created by human hands can last forever. Not walls. Not kingdoms. Not wealth. Not power. And not even the greatest civilizations in history. That is why the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj should not simply be treated as an ancient mystery. It is a warning. A warning that there will come a time when the world as people know it will change completely. And when that time arrives, the things people once depended upon for safety will no longer be enough. The Qur'an tells us that Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released, and the authentic narrations describe the terrifying events that follow. But there is also hope in the story. The believers do not save themselves through their own strength. They turn to Allah. They make dua. And Allah protects them. That lesson is just as important as the mystery itself. Because Islam does not teach us to become obsessed with finding a hidden wall. It teaches us to recognize the signs of Allah, believe His promises, and prepare ourselves spiritually. Maybe the barrier is somewhere no human being has identified. Maybe its exact location will remain unknown until Allah decides otherwise. But one thing is certain. When Allah's decree arrives, no human being will be able to stop it. So the next time you hear someone claim, "I found the exact wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj," remember that certainty requires evidence. And when the real day comes, there will be no need for explorers, maps, or theories. The truth will be impossible to ignore. If you want more Islamic history and mysteries based on authentic sources, subscribe to Project Nuravo. Because some stories from our past are not just stories. They are warnings for our future.